Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome back to Quadrupod Studios. Today we have Darcy from LOS Last One Standing Strategies. You can find him on Instagram and Facebook, I believe. And then we also have a course that he's providing on Tertia Online. I have the browser up right now here. See, you can go to the store and then you pan down to supplementary training. And then we got the 5 pillars of survival. You sign up with your information and you can learn some more from Darcy about all that info. And then I'll pass it off here to Kit to introduce everybody. And then we'll get right into the what was it? The fire triangles to
Yes,
what we're working on
sir.
today. So
Beautiful.
Kit,
Thank you
take it
very
away,
much,
sir.
Robin. That was awesome to get people sent to the videos of really what this is all about, sharing knowledge and teaching. And that's the goal of this, is to strengthen Canadians and strengthen the world people
Absolutely.
from here. So we get to go all over the place through this new spreading of mycology, which is the device.
That's right. Yeah.
Welcome, Darcy. 917 Balmoral. This is the training ground. We're here all the time doing lots of training, and now we're doing the podcast where we're going for the conversation that's going to give people the ability to start fire today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for the introduction, you guys. I really do appreciate it. Often when we think about fire, we think about, especially in this weather, right? We think about how difficult it is, to produce not just your spark, but your coal, but your flame, and then to maintain it. Really what's happening often is someone's just missing or overcomplicating the system, which is this 3-part system. So I figured, take a little time today. We'll talk a little about it, give a quick little demonstration of how to take that spark to a coal, then to a flame. And, I think you're right. The more and more we can utilize these devices for, let's say, a mycelial network of good, the better we'll all do.
Yeah.
Because that's really what it is. It's just,
Well, it's snowing out there right now. It's cold.
yeah.
First thing you want is fire. And
Right?
and if
That's
you
it.
don't have that skill set just in your mind of how to create it or possibilities of that creation, then your wet matches or your lighter without the fuel in it
Yeah.
is no good to you anymore.
Yeah, it's hard.
So-
I've seen guys even with a lighter and newspaper and store-bought firewood struggle in this weather.
Yep.
For those of you who don't know, we live here in the Pacific Northwest of Canada, which is a rainforest. So, we get rain pretty much all year round. It's just whether it's warm out or not.
Yeah.
And in the case right now, yeah, we got some slushy kind of snow out there. So it's gonna be really cold. So if you're outside and you get caught in a situation, because we were talking about why would someone need to understand fire this way? It depends, because some people, who are listening to this might be into bushcraft, some of them might be into survival, but there's some of you that, that aren't into any of that stuff. Now, fire is still important for you to understand. The simplicity of it and the complexity of it, how you can really pack it or unpack it. Because it's a 3-part system that you can have some basic understanding of, and regardless of where you are in the world, there'll be something that or a trio of things, possibly even, that you can use to create a spark, to create flame. And so it's just understanding that, right?
And when you said the 3-part system, what break down the 3-part system again for us?
It's it's easy to it's hard to remember at first, but it's
Yep.
easy to remember. So first you need a heat source, right?
Okay.
And that's usually our spark. That's the way we usually look at it, as a spark, but it doesn't necessarily have to be what we think of as a spark, because it can be chemical,
Okay.
right? Where there's no spark, but there's heat.
The alcohol sanitizer, is that something that could be utilized?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, alcohol sanitizer. Well, in fact, it's a funny thing right now with everything going on with this plague, is that people are saturating their hands with basically napalm because that's what petroleum jelly and alcohol acts like
Yep.
when you ignite it.
Oh.
Sometimes we can use them for short-term survival candles.
Mm-hmm.
Even like I'll take a little bit of duct tape or something like that to create a container. I'll fold the edges in on itself to create a little container, and then I'll add the petroleum jelly with the alcohol to it and light that. And the three of those together will burn, for about 15, 20 minutes,
Cool.
maybe a little longer. So if I'm
Help get
short
the fire
term,
going.
yeah, exactly. Or if I've stopped somewhere on a long hike and I just need a little bit of light while I get another job done. That's an easy one to create. But yeah, so your 3-part system, it's your heat, right? Which again can be a lot of different sources. It's your fuel, which can be a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
and it's your oxygen. So there's a lot of ways to manipulate each one of these for different needs. The Aboriginal people that lived here were using fire in a whole range of ways. It was really interesting. At one point, there was fire being used to bring down trees.
Mm-hmm.
So they would create a fire at the base of a tree and then pack wet mud and clay around the area of the tree they didn't want to burn, and then just burn around everything else, and it would bring down these massive trees.
Mm-hmm.
And they could use the same thing for creating dugout canoes, right?
Yep,
Once they had the log down.
Mm-hmm.
There's an
out the
interesting
middle.
YouTube page that I've followed, but Townsend.
Oh yeah,
It's an
yeah.
older guy from, I'm not sure, maybe in the Pacific or in the northeast of the U.S. But he made one of those. I watched a video where he burnt it. It takes quite a while, but depending
it's a
on
process.
different wood. But yeah, it was pretty neat to see you do it layer by layer, and then scrape it out.
Yeah.
And start another fire. And
Very meditative, and
Well-
that's part of the process of healing too. Is the smelling of the cedar and the art of creating this beautiful masterpiece that
Yeah.
was done all with your bare hands.
and
Man,
fire.
that's huge. And fire, that's right. And I think that's it. Is we just touched on is that meditative process that happens when you're working with your hands. It's something that our culture has forgotten a lot about. Often we're doing a lot of stuff on keyboards if we're using our hands. Rarely are we out using our knife to carve something. Rarely are we starting fire with our hands, other than like maybe a lighter and piece of paper or something. But we're not going through the process of creation with our hands very much anymore, and we're missing out on that meditative process in which our mind kind of does a check-in, like a self check-in, that we talked before in the last podcast. So I think that the more we can share ideas with people, to get back to those nature-based skills, working with their hands, being outside when you do a lot of these things too, is a huge part of it.
And we have
It's
a bit
huge.
of an emergency here at the studio right now. We've got 2 doobies that need to be lit in a sacred manner, and and I'm looking over at them, and that was one of the things that I thought would be a great survival tool to increase your abilities to get fire, because you really want to smoke your medicine.
Well, and that's it. One of the things that people often say in a survival situation is, don't panic.
Yeah.
You just sit down. If you have some water, have a sip of water. If you carry a survival doobie, maybe have a survival doobie.
I like that survival doobie.
Oh man, a lot of people. A lot of people in the survival community might not agree with this, but there's a lot more of their friends than they know that just don't tell them that they have a doobie stashed away in a secret spot in their survival bag, and it's for that time.
Looks outside of the box, find the positives, find the good things that are available, and then the creation of that which is necessary.
That's it.
So that's a good point.
Well,
there.
think of it. We come back to the fire triangle. It's if I don't understand how the fire triangle works, and my imagination is blocked off for whatever reason, I won't be able to make fire. In an outside of the box way.
Yep.
Whereas if I've allowed myself to get creative, if I don't have dry firewood cut in front of me, but I have a knife, I can still make fire.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I don't have a knife, if I have a sharp rock and I have certain kinds of trees in the area, I can still make fire. but getting to the
And that's because you've practiced it and you realized the processes and the art to
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah, and that's it. Is like you have to play. You have
Yeah.
to get out there and you have to play. So the survival doobie allows you to do a number of these things. Allows for the imagination to come through.
Yep.
So I can look at this 3-part system, and I can figure out, okay, well, I don't have this thing, but I have this other thing, right? Like, okay, I don't have, let's say, a ferrocium rod, but I have a high carbon knife, and I know that there is hard rocks in this area like quartz that I can catch a spark from. Or let's say I have a ferrocium rod and a knife, but I don't have any sapwood, but I have a piece of plastic in my pocket, like a guitar pick.
Yep.
I can shave down the guitar pick and I can throw a spark into it because it's petroleum. If I
Yep.
get the pieces small enough of
It'll
nearly
light.
anything, it'll light. And that's a big part of like understanding how the fuel aspect of it works. You know, I was saying it's a 3-part system. We've got our heat, we've got our fuel, and we've got our oxygen. Now, when the imagination part comes in, is now how can I manipulate each one of these 3? in
Yeah, or
different
what's
ways?
available.
That's right. What's there? You know, like one of these things is making char cloth.
Yep.
Right. So what we do for you guys that are only listening, I'm holding up a can of an old Altoid can. So it's just a little metal box, some sort of tin, and I've poked a hole in the top of it. Now, what we do with something like this is we take an organic material. This can be a whole range of things. This can be barks. This can be punk wood, like so wood that's been broken down from mycelium in the forest. This can be a part of an old shirt. This can be a part of your bandana that you've got on, chunk of your pants. In this case, I'm opening up the tin, and in this case, what we have is a piece of lamp wick. And this is a trick that a lot of Boy Scouts used back in the 1930s, 1950s, between then era. And
Guard dogs on.
yeah,
Tigger's a guard dog.
He's
He's
totally guarding
Yeah.
something. It's okay, Tigger. It's okay, buddy.
Big wolf walked by.
Do you think you could use dog hair for to catch a spark on?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm sure you could probably char some dog hair.
I was gonna
It'd be
put-
horrible smelling.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I was gonna put Tigger down as one of the tools to bring heater at night, and then fur. I start knitting socks out of his fur,
Right.
or char cloth.
Or char cloth, yeah. So what we end up doing is we take this Altoid container, close the lid. I've got that little hole in the top. I put this into the fire or into the coals, and I keep an eye on it. And what I want to see is smoke, which is actually gases being released from this can instead of flames.
But no igniting. Yeah.
That's right. So if you do see any flames, hit it with a stick, whack it.
So what temperature is that? It's starting at a certain temperature. It starts to just char the inside and move the carbon out, or
Okay, so part of what's happening is we're suffocating it. So
Yep.
I was getting back to
the no oxygen.
the no oxygen
Yeah.
thing, right? So we're talking about how can I manipulate one of these things. Now, if I manipulate the oxygen, I'm adding heat, I'm adding fuel, both enough to start a fire, but I'm starving it of oxygen,
Mhm.
which forces this into carbon because it's a natural carbon anyway. So I'm just removing certain parts of it using the fire to do this.
So you're making a charcoal out of just some other material.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm just making char cloth, and I can throw a coal on, or I can throw a spark into it and create a coal a lot easier than I would any other natural fiber that hasn't been previously charred. So this is something that you could make if you were in a situation. Like,
Yep.
let's say we get
And why do you make the char cloth?
Right.
What's the benefit of that?
the char cloth and charring anything allows you to throw a spark on it easier.
Oh,
So-
and it just lights.
Yeah, like you guys know, like with ferrocium rod, we hit it with our steel or we
Yeah.
hit it with another sharp object. We get a ton of sparks.
Okay.
Like a lot.
Yep.
Whereas if we're using something like flint and steel, we get a lot less sparks. We get
Or
a
like
small.
an old lighter with just the
Flint?
spark flint left. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
That'll be enough to light the char.
Exactly.
Okay, so then you're making your own tools for all of that fire triangle needs.
Oh yeah, and seeing what you can get from the environment, because like I said, we don't know the situation, the context you might be in. You might have gotten trapped in your car in the woods during the winter, and you didn't have a lighter. But
So
you
this is a
had,
prepped tool. This is something for your pack that you've made ahead of time.
well, this is what I was going to get at, is that a lot of people have things like this in their car,
Yep.
right? Like often you see people with some sort of container like this, a metal container
Mhm.
in their car. It doesn't have to be Altoid. It can be any sort of metal. It could be even a tin can. Just putting enough, starving it of enough oxygen will stop the actual ignition of the flame from happening. And so this is something you could prep at home, or you could train it. And this is knowing that this is also something you could have in the car or find in a car.
Mhm.
Like you could find a lot of these kinds of things in garbage.
Yep.
That's a big part of the whole 5 pillars, is understanding how can I manipulate my environment based on what is around me. How can I create heat in an environment based on the garbage that I find? How can I get out of this rain, get out of this cold, and create a warm space out of what I find, what kind of garbage I find.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you're right. This is a tin can that we could totally have ready with us, with char cloth already in it, and then at the time when we need to, actually be able to ignite it.
Sweet.
Yeah, and so I mean, for me, I like to have a number of different types of ignition with
Yep.
me. Wherever I am, I like to have at least 2 or 3 different ways to make fire.
And it's long term, because once you have the fire triangle in your head,
Yeah.
now you're able to make it with these different adverse conditions or whatever is available.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole thing we're talking about, the imagination and understanding that is
Yeah.
that you have to be able to take what you need from the space and create what you need from it. Like, for instance, we're here in this environment. We have a ton of different chords.
Mm-hmm.
We could utilize all these different chords for a number of things, not just sending electricity and messages from one place or another.
Yep.
If I was in a survival situation where I needed to create some sort of shelter, these cords could be stripped down really easily, and I could use them as my cordage.
Mm-hmm.
And it would take almost no prep, very little. And I could use them to make a bag. I could use them to carry things. Like, there's just a whole range of things that cordage can afford you, depending on what the cordage is. I mean, even one of our shirts could be cut in the coiled direction, and that could be used to make strong cordage.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a way.
What kind of fire are you going to make today? What's the process?
I was going to show you guys. So for you guys that are only listening, what I've got here in my hands, I've got a piece of flint that was sent to me from a friend in Wyoming, which is pretty cool because we don't actually have flint here. Like, we've got a number of things. Like, we've got a type of jasper here, we've got quartz here, but we don't have actual flint here. So that was really cool to get a piece of that sent up.
Mm-hmm.
We could use quartz. It will produce the same amount of spark as this flint would.
Okay.
But I just
Lots
had this
of quartz
in my pocket.
here.
Tons, right?
Yep.
So then the other part of this tool system is a piece of steel that's high carbon.
Mm-hmm.
For those who can't see, what this is like a rectangle, kind of the outline of a rectangle, and in the rectangle center, there is a little like cup shape that allows for me to put a spindle so I can create bow drill fire.
Gotcha.
Also. So this is kind of a 2-part tool that way, but it could also be used as a toggle. It could be used as a tightening agent on a rope. Like, there's a lot of ways that this shape can be used, even
Mm-hmm.
as a buckle.
Yep.
Right. I can use it because I know how long it is. I can use it then to measure things.
What is that? Is that a specific tool you bought somewhere? What is that one called?
Yeah, this was actually a really cheap knockoff brand, PSKOOK. I just found it on Amazon.
You know what they would call that?
I would look up Fire Steel. Yeah, look up Fire Steel, and then maybe type in Fire Steel and bow drill spindle
Very cool.
holder.
Right.
What's his name? David Canterbury from the Pathfinder School has a really cool one shaped in an arrowhead.
Yeah.
It's really rad.
So you can use it for your arrows and
Well, it looks cool.
Multi-purpose.
Yeah, it's multi-purpose, but it also looks really rad. It's not just a boring old triangle. Yeah, there's a number of companies that put these out. I think SA has another one, or EC has another one. Yeah, it's pretty much the same as this one. I guess
And
again,
so that's for it's hardened steel, so it's for generating the sparks.
it's interesting how this works. Yeah, so what happens here is you drive the two of them together, and there's a couple different ways of doing it. So if I hold the fire steel in one hand and I drive the flint or quartz or hard stone against it, the sparks will go downwards.
Yep.
If I switch and I hold the flint in my left hand and I drive fire steel with my right, the sparks will go on the top.
Mm-hmm.
Into your eyes?
No.
Okay, we don't want that.
No, of course. The sparks will then roll over the top.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So there's two different ways of doing this, right? Like a friend of mine who taught me this method, what he does is he keeps his char cloth in the tin at all times. And then what he does is he throws a spark into the tin directly.
Yep.
Takes the lid off. That way it gives you more surface area to catch a spark. The way I've been doing it that I find works a little easier for me, again, I'm not a pro at this, but what I've been finding works is throwing the sparks over top.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured, yeah, we could do a bit of that today. Just take a look at one of the methods that people do use to create that coal.
So that's a piece of char cloth there that we made.
Yeah, there's not much. Sorry, I'm actually
Perfect.
quite low on it since I've been doing quite a few demonstrations with
Yep.
this last few days even. And so this is just a piece of char cloth that I made from one of those lantern wicks.
Mm-hmm.
This stuff burns pretty quick, so this one piece will probably all we get to actually use.
And so just for the listener, you're putting the char cloth on top of the,
Flint.
Is it flint?
Yes, sir.
There's a flint. And then, yeah, you're going to do the sparks on top, so the sparks jump up over and hit the cloth, I guess. I'm
That's
assuming.
right. And
Land on it.
so what's interesting here that's happening
It's a spider web.
is what's happening is the strength of the stone in a way is stronger than that of the steel, and so it's driving pieces off of the steel, and they're igniting from the friction that's happening at around 800 Fahrenheit.
Little
really
chunks of steel.
Yeah, it's really neat. So here I'm gonna drive it down on an angle.
Yeah.
Trying to get these.
Yeah, I can see a couple sparks there.
There you go. Boom. What? How many hits was that? That's 8 hits.
That was too many.
That's like a home
Too many.
run, man. That's not too many.
That was
quick.
So let's
Quick.
see
We're
if,
live. We're live here. We got our doobies doing char cloth for the very first time in history here at 917 Balmoral.
There we go.
Craft cannabis with char cloth. Holy
and we're
crap. That's impressive, Darcy. I like the way it's put together. I also like the way that my medicine's ready for me. Thank you, sir.
Uh-huh.
Wow. And it tastes so much better because there's no oil sort of taking away the terpenes in this. So the flavors are coming out really, really quite well as opposed to a lighter.
Mm-hmm. Very nice work. Very nice work.
So that's one way to get really good flames in this sort of downpour of snow, because it's the wind and wetness are going to take away your abilities there.
Oh, for sure. And that's the thing about these methods is that they might not work in the situation you're in. You might not have the right elements of the fire triangle available. So you have to be able to adapt to each one of them. Again, imagination is a big part of this whole thing, right? Because let's say we didn't have any char, but we had something else.
Okay, so then is that the bark piece? It's got the oils that spark would sort of catch.
You want to grab that sapwood behind you there? We could show just on the.
You guys got some here?
Yeah, just on top of the old man's beard right over there.
Oh, nice.
Right. I'll show you guys what it looks like.
Usnia
Raw form.
sapwood.
And And
So-
this was collected just somewhere in the.
This was another hike
local
that
woods
we
here.
went on, and Darcy showed us a fallen tree that had the sapwood in the middle. It was awesome to see the practice of being able to have a little helper when it came to wet fire starting. And the oils in this sapwood are just so concentrated, it gives you a really, really nice flame.
So yeah, here's Darcy returning with a few items here.
All right, you guys, I'm back. So, I grabbed a few things because like again, getting back to our imagination. Now, part of that is in our imagination is just our understanding, right? So, part of it is our knowledge base, because we could have fanciful ideas on how something should burn, but it just doesn't burn that way because it just doesn't burn that way. Now, understanding something like this bark here, I'm holding up a piece of looks like paper birch. Actually, no, this might be silver birch. Yeah, I'd say silver birch. So this tree has a whole range of oils that are really strong that are in the bark that can be utilized for creating fire. Now, what's interesting is there's mushrooms that grow off the birch tree that will take those oils and create medicine out of them. So there's a birch polypore, there's a hoofed mushroom, a hoofed polypore, Fomes fomentarius, and then there's also there's the chaga mushroom, which is in itself probably one of the very best for catching fire of all the mushrooms.
Oh.
But with that said, there's mushrooms that aren't the best for starting a fire, but are some really good ones for carrying fire. So if you guys can't see, I'm holding up. This is a red-belted polypore. It's a shelved mushroom that grows off of trees frickin' everywhere here in North America. It has a white polypore base and front in which the pores drop out of, and at the top we have a reddish and kind of dark brownish black streak, and then a very shelf-like shape. And again, it's a polypore, so what that means is that it's a pore-based system opposed to a gill-based system or a tooth-based system for its sporulation process. And this right here, a dried mushroom like this, we put this on the edge of our fire, while we're cooking or anything like that. Once we have our fire made, this will actually hold fire for the rest of the day in a coal-like system. So
would you dig a little hole out of it, or how would you kind of?
I would probably, if I already had fire going, I'd probably just burn the side of it in the actual fire, so it got a really good coal there. Then I would suffocate it.
Gotcha.
So I would wrap that in some bark that was damp. So maybe because we are where we are, I'd probably use some red cedar. Fold it inwards. The outside of the bark is now on the inside of like a cone or like a pocket.
Yep.
And then put some damp moss in there. Or other damp pieces of bark, and that'll help to that'll keep a lot of that moisture in there.
Very cool. So being able to carry your fire to your next camp.
Yeah. And
how long you can do it? Maybe a 24-hour burn in that?
You could. You definitely. I mean, with the right size of mushroom and the right amount of suffocation, you could keep that spark going. I think the other thing too, to consider is what are the goals? What are your basis of goals? Like, do you want to have high level survival knowledge, or do you want to have basic understanding of how to make a fire? And for most people, they don't want to take the time to create that kind of really solid toolkit, the mental toolkit of all that knowledge. So that's why I want to share the idea of the simplicity of the fire triangle, thinking of it that way.
Yep.
Thinking of it as something in which as long as you remember how it works, you don't have to remember exactly how it has to be made each time. Because some people get stuck on like the very specific log house technique, or
I can't find this certain wood that I always have used, and now I'm just gonna give up.
Oh my god, I don't know what to do. Right? Like that happens all the time. Guys are like,
it's a cold night.
Yeah, or the wood splits differently than what they're used to splitting, and so they're like, I can't get the same small pieces, or I can't get the same kind of feather sticks, or whatever the problem is.
So the triangle that you have now is identifying each piece of the triangle and making sure. So can you give some examples of the first step is the supply, I guess, of the goods, of the different sized sticks. And,
Right. Yeah.
and
So
then-
yeah, exactly. You need to go through some, depending on what your materials are, they're going to be your fuel.
Yeah.
You need to go through some processing. So like for us on a day like today, let's just say, for instance, we get stuck out somewhere. All we have is some knives on us. We're immediately, because of where we are, we're going to look probably for cedar, for a down cedar tree. It has enough sap. For you guys that don't know, cedar it's a sapwood, and when it dies, it creates a bit of a layer, like there's a punky layer on the outside. But even after 100 years, a stump will have really nice dry wood on the inside, and so you just have to get past that punky stuff, get to that. Now break that stuff as small as possible. If that's all you got, get it as small as possible. I'm talking like
And
shavings.
it'll almost catch a spark too. Some of that really
for sure.
dry kind of it gets airy and it's really light.
That's right. Yeah, and that's exactly it. Is you want to have a lot of volume in it. You want to have tiny, tiny, tiny curls that have a lot of light space in between them. Funny thing, my doobie's gone out.
Oh,
So I'm gonna go.
well,
through
we talk it out. That's what happened.
Yeah, no. Well, it gives us a chance to run through kind of a bit like
This
what
is
we're talking about.
And so this is the birch bark.
Yeah, what I'm going to show is I'm going to take some of the sapwood. So
Okay,
for you guys
sapwood,
that
yeah.
can't see, I'm holding up a piece of what sapwood might look like when you're in the forest here in BC. And it looks kind of, rough on the outside, looks a little just like rotten wood. But the difference is on the inside of this, there's some really strong fuel for starting fires and for maintaining fires in all kinds of weather. And so this is more than likely from one of our local sapwoods, whether it be fir or hemlock or spruce. And as soon as you break it or cut it, you can smell that kind of like pine sol smell. Right away you can smell it. And that's a sign that there's some fat wood within that piece. And so right away you shave off all the punkiness on the outside until you get to that kind of like amber looking stuff.
All full of the big sugars.
That's
and
right,
the
all the juices
oils
in there.
from that the tree supplying itself when it was alive.
That's right.
Just dries up in there.
It just sinks down into the roots
Yeah.
or into the base. So what I'm holding now is a piece from a tree that had the diameter of the table that we're at, which is about 6 by 6.
Cedar.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
sorry. No, this was I think it was a hemlock.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I think it was like an ancient hemlock. It was freaking huge. And it was really snowy night when I dug into the stump to get this.
Perfect.
Um,
So that's like real world finding the fuel in that cold, snowy environment.
yeah, exactly.
So that's part of what we're talking about here. This fire triangle is being able to use your senses to find the three in the environment.
Yeah. No, and how to manipulate each of the three to create what you need.
Yeah.
In this case, I'm going to shave down the sapwood into a fuzzy kind of form, and then we're going to throw a spark on it to get the fire. And it's pretty easy, really. I mean, we're just using our knife here. I got a Mora Eldris. I'm going to drag on a 90-degree angle against the wood, and doing so, I'm going to create these tiny little curls of fuzz. And again, we were talking about getting things small.
They're almost white. They almost look like just sap, straight sap, rather than wood.
Yeah, and so
it's probably a ratio.
It's a really good point to bring up, is that you don't want to have a piece that is just sap, because it won't burn the same. You won't be able to catch a spark like this.
Yep.
You want to have that ratio of wood in there to actually get the spark, to have a space
like
to catch.
the wood is the fuel and the oil is the heat.
Spark assist, maybe, or something.
Well, what it is just it's a saturation.
Yeah.
So it's like if there's too much oil, it'll saturate and it creates a space that doesn't allow for the spark to really catch.
And so this takes a little bit of patience and a little skill work with the knife. That is, you can go both ways. I like that way.
Yeah, we can go both ways, and you can go. You can drive a little more force down to get more at a time. I'm just kind of taking my time here.
Yeah. So
that
people
smells good.
people taking the patience to do the parts where they put the triangle together first,
Yeah.
and then take the action. People often want to get to the action part of the spark or the ignition.
Or life.
Yeah. So slowing down to these in the meditative state with the cannabis, we're slowing our thought processes down to make sure that we've prepared all the little sections that make that ignition time work.
Right. Well, you need to, it's like with anything worth doing is worth taking the time. I mean, the fire making, especially, what I try to adhere to with fire making is instead of rushing, I think to myself, whether I'm in the rain or in the dry, instead of rushing, taking the time, the patience to go through meticulously the details. Go through the details. Am I like this little pile of fuzz we have right here? If we were outside right now, would be one of the last things that I would do for my fire. It'd be one of the last things that I produce because it's so small that it's going to be pulling in moisture out of the air. So even if I have this covered long enough outside, it's just going to draw more moisture in, and it's going to be harder to get a spark on it.
Well, it's almost like the adage, the measure twice, cut once, can be applied here in a sense where
always
you get everything ready, and then you're not working too hard and getting tired out, and then frustrated because you've been spinning your bow thing for half an hour. And nothing
yeah, and that's true. I mean,
that's part of the practice too.
Yeah, there's a lot of elements here. There's a lot of balance, I think with anything, and because there's times when you do have to rush a little bit, and there's times you can slow down.
Cold in the water, you gotta get in.
Yeah, you don't want to die, right? You don't want to freeze. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drive, because before we were taking the steel, and the steel was driving, or sorry, the flint was driving sparks off the steel. Now we're going to take the steel and we're going to drive sparks off the ferrocerium. And these are often called flint.
And the reason why we're using these things is because in wet, the matches won't work. These things can get wet. They can be used on other things, and then still produce the fire at the end of the day, right?
Well, and one, $6 for a ferrocerium rod that lasts you, a lot of fires, like maybe a couple hundred fires.
Cool.
And it's small, and it can be done any time in the seasons. Yeah, and it can be used in a lot of different ways. So I mean, that's all part of it. Like we're going back to the fire triangle and imagination. Well, if we're pre-packing gear, it's really important that we understand we can utilize that same gear for a lot of different things. So it's not like I'm not bringing out this one tool for this one thing if I'm out hiking. I might do that if I'm doing some long-term staying, right? If I found a spot, I'm actually going to stay there for a long term. For sure. Yeah, I might bring some specific gear for specific chores and stuff. But otherwise, I'm going to try to get everything to work as many different ways as possible.
Yeah.
It's kind of like our bodies, right?
The movements that heal.
So I'm going to make a couple small chips. After the fuzz, I'm going on a couple sizes up from there. And what these are for is this is to maintain the flame long enough that I can get the rest of my fuel to burn.
Perfect.
And so I just need a couple just for our job right now. And again, I'm going to drive the sparks off my ferrocerium rod with my steel.
That's the back of your knife, right?
Yeah. I prefer to use the back.
I would
save
say
my
so.
blade.
Yeah.
So we have ignition. Now we add our chips. And you see how fast those catch.
So there you go. You got the right fuel for the task. Using wet wood is not what we're doing. We're using the insides of the sap woods, and look at those oils are just. It's like a candle.
You can hear it kind of popping.
Cracking.
Yeah, and it's like there's a lot of different ways we can even use
that is the
sap.
best emergency dooblet I've ever seen. I like that. It's almost better than the magnifying glass. It's like
Well,
but
and,
it's
this
there's all these
here,
different possibilities to create with the fire triangle your
so many.
options.
I mean, just here, this little
Is that your
piece.
char cloth? Maybe you could make char cloth out of that.
Yeah, we could char this. So this is
Yeah.
I'm holding up a piece of usnea. A lot of you guys might know it as old man's beard. It's a type of lichen, which is interesting in itself. It has a really strong antibacterial and antimicrobial qualities, but is also good as a water extraction for external infections and internal infections. But at the same time, this is great for making fire. Once it's dried out like this, it'll catch.
So that's one of those things that's a multi-purpose thing that would be
Tool.
good to
Yeah, yeah, we could use
have
this
in
to
the-
even scrub, right? It's abrasive. We could use
Right.
this to do all kinds of stuff with. If I had a wound, this is one of the things that I'm going to use on my
I
body.
often had that in tub talks.
Yeah, yeah, there you go.
Having a tub with some of these lichens and polypores created almost a sponge cleaning and help cleansing.
Well, and it's they're really good for you. I've seen people get really bad infections in the woods from being out there for a long term, and that is one of the components I've seen clear up external infections.
Very cool.
Yeah,
And that's just putting it on top of the wound and then covering it, or is it actually making some type of
so there's a couple
other
different ways.
tincture with that? Or
So if I had a cut, let's say I cut myself really bad, if I had this available and I had let's say yarrow leaf available, because it's a stipic, so it stops bleeding. I put that into the wound, and it's also antibacterial and antimicrobial, so I don't have to worry about a secondary infection from putting that into the wound.
We need a series on all these, Darcy. This is information that people can then gather. This is a fire triangle, and we've got right into the healing abilities
It's
of
all
the wild.
overlapping, right?
Yeah.
It's all overlapping because yeah, I'd put this on after, but yeah, we could get into that another time. I would make for infections, I would use a hot water extraction. So I would do a decoction. So I would boil this for 30 minutes or so. Use that water, let it cool. I might even reduce it on a lower heat, and then I would use that as as a wash for external stuff. If I was making a parasite cleanse in the wild, this is one of the components that I'd also do a decoction with to draw out the water soluble metabolites.
and how do you
Very
spell that? Is it USNEA maybe? Is that how
I
you-
believe so. Yeah.
Usnea. Yeah.
Usnea.
That one's from 900 feet. That
and-
one's from behind the on Mountain Drive out in the woods here,
Oh,
and
soup.
it's got a different color.
It's a great piece.
Yeah, it was a dropped tree, and in the area that we harvested it, it was all the elk had been through and stripped all of the little fruit bushes, even of every little leaf. It was a weird looking little forest.
And so
Yeah.
its application for fire though is that you make can you make char cloth out of it, or would you
Oh,
just
yeah,
use
yeah,
it
yeah.
for a different?
You could make it because it's organic. You could totally make a char cloth off of this. And you know what's cool is that if you think about the shape, there's a lot of air in there,
Catching
right?
sparks.
So it's going to catch a spark really well. And again, that's we keep talking about these different components of the fire triangle. This is one component, but because of its shape, it allows for a third component and second and a third really easily. So because of its shape, there's a lot of surface space. So that means it'll take a lot of sparks on a lot of different spots of it all at once. At the same time, because of its shape, it allows for a lot of oxygen flow. So again, the more and more ways you can understand the fire triangle, the more you can look for the right things for the right job to make the right kind of fire. Which is, this is fun because then again, we've talked about lens building before. This is one of those ways that you go into an environment, immediately your lens shows you what you need to do, the different things you need to do. Instead of you needing to look and read a book again or watch some YouTube videos, you've already built the lens, you've already built the toolkit. And understanding a component like this, usnea, is a really, really easy way to do that. And you're covering how many things.
And by lens, do you mean just the way you're looking at objects in the world as tools or potential tools instead of just whatever they are?
Instead of just stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything that exists is multifaceted in some perspective. everything in existence, whether it be emotions, whether it be a coffee cup, whether it be a chunk of usnia. They are multifaceted and can be utilized in many different ways depending on the situation. And so using a strong lens to view the world that way, you can problem solve. That's right.
All your perceptions of what's possible.
What's available, exactly. The opportunities that are there, because there's always something. There's always something.
Yeah.
No matter where you are, there's some way to make a fire. There's some way to get what you need.
And a lot of the people that are in those situations would struggle right away with that first step of fear, getting involved, looking at the engine block and going, well, I don't really know how to be a mechanic, and where do I start?
Right.
And so fire would be the number one starting place.
It's
for where you want to have your kids know how to protect themselves, heat themselves, cook for themselves.
Think of all the things we use fire for. Like if we were without electricity, like there's so many things. Even the simplicity of having fire when you're sleeping alone in the woods in a debris shelter, having fire there as your companion. Yeah. It's your friend.
Crackling, the movements, colors, and I think those natural things. This is why we go do our camping and have our campfires and stuff. So, but now practicing at the campfire, some of these arts, at least to be prepared for, is that could be something that people are sharing with their families.
With the utmost, I think it's one of the most important things we could do with our families is to go over some of these kind of basic, fundamental skills. Like understanding how do I get food? What is food acquisition? How do I get it? Where does it come from? What do I do with it? How can it be used to keep me healthy and for enjoyment? How can it be used in all these different ways? I was talking with my wife the other day about this book that was her grandmother's in high school. It was a grade 9 high school book that we still have. And we're looking at it, and holy shit, like the stuff that a grade 9 knows, or in those days.
Have like animal processing and stuff like
all
that.
Kinds of stuff, man. Wow. Real life skills, like all kinds of them that we don't get now. Like you, even if you take a course, like these are things that you wouldn't get all together, and it's like home ec.
Yeah.
Wow.
Things with so much of those, it just not necessarily going to use them at all times, but it actually brings you closer to the earth and understanding of your own humanity and the natural world and so many other things, right?
So with
that's really true.
With the fire triangle, and then just outside of the triangle, as in some of the things that you do for safety so you don't burn the forest down, wind blocks so that you have it facing your direction, you're not getting smoke so you can still get the heat, or cooking things. We could break into some of those other outside areas that are important to know too. Like what would be some of the basics? Obviously maybe a rock pit or a rock kind of area that's not going to go into the roots and stuff of trees. we've had that happen. You're like, whoa.
Oh yeah, that happens. So that's a good point. Whenever you are training fire, understanding where you would be training is really important. Being aware of your surroundings. I'm always preaching about awareness and the value of it. And this is one of those moments is like, okay, well, let's say I dig a hole into the ground. What am I digging into? Am I digging into something that is flammable? Maybe I don't think it is because I can't burn it with a lighter. With a lighter. But yeah, if there's an old bog underneath, those coals can catch across yards and yards and yards, and fires can pop up and burn houses. So caution is definitely important, and awareness. Again, I keep coming back to it for that same reason. Be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of what's underground. Be aware of what's above ground. So don't build a fire within at least 6 feet of a tree. At least. There's just, even if it doesn't seem like it's going to catch, there's a good chance it could, just from the heat.
The leaf litter, right? On most of those trees builds up quite a bit of dry kind of small layer.
Well, where we live, Pacific Northwest,
Yeah.
we've got all these sapwoods. We've got stuff like, hemlock and the cedars and the spruces and the firs, and these guys, the last few branches before the ground are often dead, and those branches are great for us starting a fire that we need, but also can catch and then
Yeah.
start to burn the higher stories of
What's
branches.
the sort of level, like a small fire, 1 foot fire? What's the level of overhead that should be kind of, because those trees, would just
Yeah, small. I mean, if it's a small fire, big enough to, cook food, let's say 1.5 foot across to 2 feet across. Flames are going to probably be, if you dig into the ground a foot, your flames are still going to be 1.5 to 2 feet above ground. You want to, I would say safely, I'm going to have about 10 feet at least between the top of the flames. At least, if
Yeah,
not
because
Because
more.
that
people
radiant
would be
heat.
tempted to build fires under a tree because then you have your part of
Warm.
your shelter already
Yeah.
built there. But then if you light the thing on fire, then that might not be. a
Yeah,
good
it's
thing.
counterproductive. Yeah, like definitely being aware of your surroundings and where you're building your fire is really important. The other thing too is, like you said, ground debris. What's around where you're creating the fire? What else could catch?
Yep.
Are you building it, somewhere where there's a whole bunch of needles from one of these sapwood trees that have dropped? That could be a major issue, and they'll catch really quick. So yeah, keeping a clean space whenever you're training these skills, and also even more so in the survival situation, because if something goes wrong there, you have nowhere to go anyway. You're already in a survival situation. So digging down, if you don't find hard packed clay or heavy rock or something like that, or even sand, if you're finding more organic matter, it makes sense to line it then with something that has a less chance of igniting in any way. Rock liner's a real easy one. Mud's an easy one. But again, it depends. How long you're going to be there for, what kind of fire you plan on making. Are you there overnight? All these things. Again, if you
And
know
what-
the construct, if you know the principles, the details, the imagination will fill. Right?
Approximately the length of, so you show up to an area, the length of setting up your triangle properly could take half an hour, 2 hours, depending on what you're putting together. And what do you put together? 3 types of different sized woods, or what's the process of how long this should take?
I mean, it depends on what you have, and depends on your skill set. So, like, for myself, with the tools that I usually carry with me, I can get a fire going in almost any spot here in BC really quickly, because I know what to look for. So I'm not going to be fumbling trying to burn some crap they found on the ground, which I often see people. They see small pieces, and they think they're dry because they're small and they're on the ground. They're easy to get. They try to burn those, and that takes forever. And And if they do get it going, it doesn't stay.
Yep.
Whereas, like, if you know what to look for, it cuts down that time a lot. So with the right skill set, it allows you, again, with the right lens, to see everything in the environment you need as you're walking in. You'll make mental notes of where the birch trees were, mental notes of where the cedars, where the stumps, mental notes of things that look like the kind of stump that we might find sapwood in, with that big spiky kind of like castle-like top. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that you would notice. And realistically, if you knew already that you were in a bad situation, you should start to grab things that are flammable and dry and put them on your body somewhere that is dry, right? So don't
While you're hiking, because you see it. Well, I'm going to use this. Right?
Yeah. Put it around maybe your waist.
Yep.
Put it somewhere where you're not going to sweat on it, but maybe between layers. But put it somewhere that is going to give it some warmth and some heat. Because again, that's part of the triangle.
You're planning for that future cold night.
That's right. So, like, if I have a piece of usnea that I pull off a tree, off a dead branch, that's dry, that's something I'm going to put somewhere on my body. It's going to give it some heat. Because I'm going to throw heat into this anyway. If there's that much more, I'm just stacking the deck, my possibilities. So when it comes down to sizes of things, like, Man, for here, if it's wet out like this, I'm gonna create a fuzz. I'm gonna create shavings, and when I say shavings, they would be um, tiny pieces, like the size of.
Like the ones you just made there.
Yeah, for
For
someone who's just listening, we're looking at like maybe a centimeter long, 2 millimeters thick piece of shaving.
Like maybe big thumbnail when you cut your thumbnail, that type of.
Yeah, that's right. Like,
size
yeah,
of those.
Robin, thanks, bro. It's about that size, as long as they don't get that big.
Yeah.
So,
Or the thumbnail.
Well,
yeah,
my thumbnail's a bit big right now. I needs
totally.
needs a bit of a trim.
You could use thumbnails for burning.
Holy fuck, don't.
possible.
It,
They don't
smells
smell.
so
They don't
bad. Don't cook anything on that.
that.
And that's part of, powder fire is understanding when you burn a fuel
Yeah.
and you go to cook your food on it, understand that it could impart taste, it can
Mhm.
impart
Yeah.
poison.
Poison.
Like cow
Yeah.
patties, they burn pretty good, but
But yeah,
you
but
wouldn't
I
want
don't know
to
if you don't
cook
want
your steak
your
on
eggs.
one.
Yeah, your eggs cooking.
I mean, maybe that's a particular brand. I don't know. But yeah, so I go fuzz, I go shavings. Depending on how wet it is, I might go up like a couple sizes up from shavings, so
Yep.
it's just a little bit thicker, maybe a little bit longer.
Mhm.
And what I often do is I'll often keep my pieces about 1.5 feet in length to 1 foot in length, because that's about as big as the fire that I usually make.
Yep.
So I figure if I keep my
So
pieces,
by using those size pieces, that determines the size the fire can get to.
yeah,
That's your fire triangle right there. Hey?
Well,
So-
you really could make a shape of a triangle that way for
Well,
sure.
what I noticed is you got less smoke in your dry pieces. You got less size, so it's really almost a well hidden little fire. It's just for you, not this big fire, that campfire is raging in somebody's backyard.
Well, it depends on your goals. Like it always, like I say, like
Cooking.
skill set gives you the options. Goals are going to determine how do you use the options that are available to you.
Mhm.
So if we need to be found because we're in a lost situation, and we have a shit ton of fuel, we might just make a giant fire
Yep.
somewhere. If we are in a situation where we don't have a lot of fuel, and we just need to cook some food, we're gonna probably make a smaller fire. We're gonna use it differently. And something I want to mention too, depending on the type of wood you're using, you're gonna get more heat, more light, less heat, less light, better coals for cooking, or coals that don't last long enough to cook good with.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting because every area in the world has trees that work best with all these different things. Like here we have different trees that give you, like fir's a good one, that gives you a lot of light, a lot of heat, and decent burning, but doesn't give you the best coals that something like a hardwood would.
Dried arbutus on the tree that's all dried and ready. They've got those big chunks.
Oh yeah, they can be good. Yeah, for sure. And I think that getting to know all the trees through practice, is part of it. We're talking about patience, we're talking about balance. Before, a big part of it is that hands-on learning, then reading or researching. Hands-on learning, researching,
Mhm.
learning. Back and forth, because that way you don't get stagnant. That way, when you fail, you can go find out why and get better.
And then the smoking of the cannabis just makes it that much more exciting because you're like, well, I didn't really fail. We're just out there having fun. This happened. Now I know how.
Got the joint lit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I've read a lot about people over the years bringing like bits of chocolate or things like that in their survival kit, and understanding how morale can save you is huge.
Mhm.
Even just in a game,
Yeah.
yourself, you were a rugby player.
Yeah.
You think about like if you had high morale in a game compared to low morale in a game, it was totally different.
Totally different. Yeah, willpower to maybe create that fire comes with your precision and all your arts you're practiced, and then in the situation where you need it the most, it's going to be there for you because you've done it.
Oh man, that's huge.
Well done, Darcy. That's a great art to pass on to people right now. Starting fire in this snow and cold is something that's
First
really
day of
essential.
winter.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
this is definitely this is part of our actual winter.
Mm-hmm.
We got a little slush in the air.
Well, yeah, we're at an hour here. Is there anything that you think we missed that you'd like to get into a little bit more?
Oh
we
man,
could go a little
we
bit
could
longer
talk.
if you want.
I could spend years on fire alone.
Mhm.
I'll fly over some basics. Like we're talking about, is understanding how to utilize these three parts is paramount to understanding the triangle, and you must obey the fire triangle.
Keep it balanced.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you wanna have balance. Depending on your goals. Like I might have a slight imbalance here and here and here and here, but it is for a specific goal. Like for instance, we made our char cloth. We suffocated it of oxygen so that we could create a product, a specific product. Maybe we want a fire to burn extremely fast and really hot. What do? We add way more oxygen. Like look, that's how we make metal. These ancient ways.
Yeah, you got to get your what's that called with the
Yeah.
the bellows going.
The bellows, yeah, exactly. And that's because we're adding
Or your
more
lungs.
oxygen. Or maybe we want to
Yeah.
make a really large fire. We add a ton more fuel. So understanding how to manipulate each one of these and all the different things that are around us that are flammable and how to create the product that we need, whether it be the heat or maybe it's something that we are shaping, because fire is obviously, we use it for shaping things all the time. Take a piece of PVC, make a sheath for a knife. We could make a bow that way. Like there's just so many ways to manipulate your environment utilizing heat or a fire. So yeah, the basics of it really, again, understanding those three components, how they go together, and trying them in different environments, different seasons with different materials will only lead you to a better understanding of your environment.
And it sounds like the main one I'm catching is if you know these things, you first look at what your actual goal is, and then you can gather the parts of the triangle that you will apply to that goal.
Yeah, 100%.
And then you go from there.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, exactly. Because that's it. You got to know what you're doing first.
Yeah. And
Awesome.
so folks can find a lot of these little videos on your Instagram.
Yep.
LOS strategy, as well as I'll pull up again the website here, which is Tertia Online. I spell it out here for you. TIRSIA online.com. You go to the store, scroll down, find the supplementary training area, 5 pillars of survival, sign up, and make yourself more comfortable in the world, more knowledgeable, and you move into 2021 with a heightened sense of self and all that good jazz.
Well done. Awesome,
Kit?
guys. Really proud, really proud of both you guys. I learned so much from you guys on different things in martial arts, in fire starting, and in challenges and how you meet those challenges. So well done, guys. Really proud to have you here.
Thank you, Kit.
Thank you,
Darcy,
brother.
any last words for the people?
Oh, man. Yeah. Remember to breathe. Things may seem stressful. We're going to get through this.
Absolutely. Well, thank you
Breathe
very much.
through your nose.
We will return again in undisclosed amount of time for future things.